I ran the commissary at Kestrel Point for 6 years before anyone under 30 believed I'd done anything else. To the joint intake classes, I was just the quiet man behind the counter who ladled out protein stew and never told war stories. My dog Scout was even less remarkable to look at, a graying border collie who slept under the condiment rack and earned her keep mostly by not stealing bacon. I'd handled dogs for the Corps for 22 years before my knees gave out, and they put me on kitchen rotation instead of a pension. Scout came with me. Neither of us complained. She'd worked search and recovery in 3 theaters before she ever smelled a mess hall floor, and she'd forgotten more about reading a room than most of the officers who ate in it would ever learn. The Ather Concord had been running joint cadet intake with us for 8 months by then. Young recruits, human and Ather both, learning to eat in the same mess hall without flinching at each other's table manners. Ather cadets ran hot-blooded and quick to prove themselves, all sharp elbows and louder voices than the room needed. Human cadets ran the usual mix of eager and dumb. Both species agreed, without ever discussing it, that the old man and his dog were furniture. Scout got scratched behind the ears by whoever walked past. I got asked for extra portions. Neither of us minded the arrangement. 2 of them, a human recruit named Priya Osei and an Ather cadet everyone called Denvo, had decided the funniest thing in the galaxy would be to rig the proximity klaxon to sound during the noon rush and watch the new intake scatter. I heard later they'd spent the better part of a week on it, borrowed a maintenance override chip off a friend in engineering, timed it against the shift change so nobody senior would be watching the junction, and picked noon, specifically, because that's when the mess hall runs fullest and a scare goes furthest. It was, by their own account afterward, a good plan. They just hadn't planned for the actual galaxy to show up on the same afternoon. I found out about it exactly the way you'd expect, 30 seconds after it happened, along with everyone else. The klaxon at Kestrel Point sounds the same whether it's a drill, a joke, or the real thing. That's by design. You can't train a room to ignore an alarm and still trust it when the hull's actually breached. So when it went off at 4 minutes past noon, 200 cadets did exactly what they'd been drilled to do. They went for the exits. Fast, loud, and in no particular order. Trays hit the floor. Someone's chair went over backward. An Ather cadet near the far wall let out a sound I'd only ever heard their species make in genuine distress, which set off 3 more of them, which is how you get 200 young people convinced in under 4 seconds that the ceiling is about to come down on them. I want to be clear about something. Scout didn't react. She lifted her head off the floor, looked at the door, and put her head back down. I'd seen that look 1,000 times. It was the look she gave a truck backfiring, or a slammed hatch, or Denvo dropping a tray. Noise, not signal. She'd been trained on real proximity alerts since she was 14 months old, and she knew this wasn't one. I was reaching for my radio to ask Ops what was going on when the second tone came in underneath the first. A low double pulse most of the room never even registered, because it was quieter than the fake alarm covering it. I knew that tone. Every handler on this station knew that tone. It meant an unlisted contact had entered close orbit and nobody up top had cleared it yet. That's when Scout stood up. She didn't bark. She didn't run. She walked to the center of the room, sat down facing the observation windows, and went very, very still. Ears up, weight forward, eyes locked on empty space past the glass where nothing was visible yet. I'd trained that posture into 100 dogs over 2 decades, and I'd only ever seen it mean one thing. Something is out there, and it is close, and I am not moving until you tell me what to do about it. 200 cadets were shoving toward doors that led nowhere useful. Priya and Denvo were near the front of the crowd, already looking sick, because they knew exactly which alarm they'd rigged, and it wasn't the one still sounding. I didn't shout. 22 years teaches you that shouting adds panic. It doesn't subtract it. I walked out from behind the counter, put 2 fingers to my mouth, and whistled the low note I use when I want every dog on a range to check in with me at once. Scout didn't move, but her ear swiveled my way, which was answer enough. "She's not spooked," I said, pitch just loud enough to carry. "Watch her. If she's not moving, there's nowhere in this room you need to run to." It shouldn't have worked. A room full of panicking 20-year-olds doesn't usually stop for an old man and his dog. But enough of them had grown up around K9 handlers, or Ather pack beasts, or something with 4 legs and better instincts than a klaxon, that the ones nearest me slowed first, and the slowing spread backward through the crowd the way it does, faster than any order barked over a comm. Ops came through a moment later, flat and official. Unlisted vessel, non-hostile transponder, requesting docking clearance. All personnel stand down from the false alarm currently in effect. Someone up top had already traced the source of the fake klaxon to a maintenance junction 2 decks up, the exact junction Priya and Denvo had been suspiciously interested in that morning. Nobody was hurt. Nobody got trampled. The unlisted vessel turned out to be a Concord survey ship that had lost its transponder handshake 3 systems back and was very embarrassed about the whole thing, which put it in good company that day. Priya and Denvo stood in the mess hall afterward, looking like they'd rather be back on the survey ship's flight path than in front of me. I didn't yell at them either. I've found that doesn't work any better on cadets than it does on dogs. "You wanted to scare the new intake," I said. "You scared the whole station instead, and you nearly buried the one signal that mattered under the one that didn't. That's the part you fix, not the prank, the stacking." Denvo, to his credit, asked the only question worth asking. How did she know? Before Ops even called it. I looked down at Scout, who had already gone back to lying under the condiment rack like none of it had happened, chin on her paws, entirely unbothered by the fact that she'd just outperformed a station's worth of sensor arrays. "She didn't know anything," I said. "She just tells the truth about what's actually happening. Every time. And never once about what's supposed to be happening. Most of you haven't met anything that does that before." They wrote up the incident as a training failure and closed it inside a week. Ops sent down a station-wide notice reminding everyone that unauthorized use of the emergency systems was a disciplinary matter, and Priya and Denvo spent the next month on maintenance detail in the exact junction they'd rigged, which struck most of the mess hall as fitting. Nobody put Scout in the report, because there was no clean way to write "the 12-year-old dog under the condiment rack correctly identified an unregistered contact 4 seconds before our sensor suite did, without it sounding like a joke." I didn't push it. She wasn't after credit. She was after the bacon Priya brought her the next morning as an apology, which Scout accepted without ceremony, the way she accepted everything, like it was owed to her, and like nothing about the day before had been worth losing sleep over. The survey ship docked without further incident 2 days later. Its captain, a weathered old Aether pilot who'd apparently been running solo routes since before the Concord and my corps had ever traded a word, came through the mess hall on his way to quarters and stopped cold at the sight of Scout asleep under the rack. He didn't say anything to me. He crouched down, held out one hand, palm flat, and waited until she opened one eye, sniffed him once, and went back to sleep without further comment. Then he straightened up, nodded to me like we'd settled something between us, and walked on. I never did learn what that particular gesture meant where he came from. I had a guess. I still ladle stew. I still let her sleep under the rack, and every new intake that comes through eventually asks me why the old dog gets away with ignoring every alarm on the station. I tell them the truth. She's not ignoring them. She's the only one actually listening.